Good morning, everyone. Thank you for joining our first of our webinar series. This is our first time using this platform to deliver an educational series, and we look forward to your feedback on what works for you and what doesn't. My name is Tan Razai, and I'll be hosting the session on Lawson Security. This session is being recorded via video, so it will be available to you for download later. We're going to go through things a little bit quick. So if you missed something, you can always go back to our site at nogalis.com under the education section and review the video again. We'll also make this presentation available for you for download and whatever other materials. If you don't mind, please hold your questions until the very end, and you can type them into the chat box on the very left side of your screen at the end. So we asked all of you during the registration process which percent of you were already on Lawson Security and versus LAUA. And what we found was that nearly half of you are already on Lawson Security and the rest are not. That 10% are folks that just didn't reply to that question. So we're going to gear this more towards those that are on Lawson Security, but will definitely contribute to those who are not. So what is covered in this webinar is an overview of how security used to work and how it works in Lawson Security, an introduction to some of the components and terminology and tools that are available, few simple tasks that you're likely to perform. We'll go through a couple of those. We'll talk about implementation methodology and how you should implement security. And then finally, we'll talk briefly about some troubleshooting that you can do. Looks like there's 39 people online at the moment. Hopefully some others are joining and they can catch up with us soon. So in the old world of LAUA security, which apparently nearly half of you are still on, our user, we'll call him Martin. Martin on the left, he had access to secured objects within Lawson, meaning screens and batch jobs and reports, through a security class that he was assigned. So in this case, he was assigned the HR general class, and that gave him access to a certain number of screens within Lawson. The problem with that always was that if there was another user that was very similar to Martin, but let's say he didn't have access to PR67, we would have to create an additional class for that user in order to create that custom level security for that other user. You know, that resulted in a number of security classes that became hard to maintain. The other shortcoming of LAUA was that the logic and criteria that were available to us in restricting Martin from specific objects within Lawson weren't very powerful. They wouldn't allow us to restrict security using any kind of powerful criteria or logic. It was basically you either have access or you don't have access. There was a bit around process levels and some of the other elements, but mainly it was you do or you do not. In the new security model, we introduce roles. Roles are, you can think of roles as your role within a company. So a user has a role within a company, or sometimes a user has multiple roles within a company. In fact, it's probably better to think of it that way. Because we all have multiple roles within a company. And each one of those roles has a set of tasks associated with it that you want to accomplish within the Lawson application. Those tasks you can think of as security classes. And each task will require you to have access to certain securable objects. And by securable objects, I mean, in this context, I mean those screens within Lawson that you need access to. So in this scenario that you see on your screen right now, our user has access to several roles. One of those roles, which is the HR general role, gives him access to the HR setup class, the PRX the PR access class, the HR employee class, and the PA action class. And those each have their own secured objects within them. Now, there could be some complicated security rules within each one of those, but really in total, the idea is that security classes are assigned to roles, and roles are assigned to the user. So there, I'll go over the hierarchy again. So a user, in the new security model, a user has many roles, and a role has many security classes, and a security class has many rules. So what can we secure within the new Lawson security? So when we talk about these securable objects, this is what we're talking about. By an object, I mean any of these bullet points that you see on this presentation view. Mainly, we're going to talk about online screens, batch screens, and files. Now, online screens are screens you're used to on a day-to-day basis, like your HR11 or your AP10. And batch screens are just your reports and batch jobs that you normally run. And files are files within your database system, so those are the database tables. The rest of these are elements, element groups, data sources, and secure boot types, which we're not going over in this presentation. So what is a rule? So we talked about, I'm going to go back 2 slides, we talked about a user has roles, a role has security classes, and a security class has rules. So a rule is the tool you have to secure access to a specific screen. So you can either grant all access to an object or screen, you can deny all access to an object or a screen, or you can give unconditional access to an action. So unconditional access to an action means that you're giving access to one of the functions on the screen. So on a screen, you normally have add, change, delete, or inquire. For example, I could give unconditional access for you to inquire on a screen, but not add or change or delete that record, meaning you always have access to inquire. There's also conditional rule access, which means I can determine a set of criteria for whether or not you as a user have access to a screen or a record or a subset of a screen. This last one is the most powerful one because it can allow you to determine when, in a specific condition, a user gets access to a screen. So there's a set of tools available in Lawson Security when you install it. There's really 2 tools that get installed. One of them is the Security Administrator. This is the main one that you would be working with on a day-to-day basis. And this tool helps you manage security profiles, add new classes and rules to those classes, assign classes to roles. And mainly what you'll use it for is to manage your user profile. So you'll be able to assign roles to users, maybe create new users, and manage generally the user. You can also run reports and manage some security settings from within this tool. The other tool is the RM Administrator, which is not a day-to-day tool. It is really an implementation time tool. And that is used to create new groups and roles and other objects within the resource manager. The way you log into the Security Administrator tool is similar to how you log into Portal. Well, not quite. It's the same credentials. It's going to ask you for a server. That is the same server that you use to log into Portal, so it's your web server. You don't need the HTTP there, and you certainly obviously don't need the /Lawson/portal there either. It's just a server piece. Then your username and password. And in order to get in there, you need to be a security administrator. And that has to be set up prior to the getting in. Once you get into the tool, you'll notice a collapsible menu on the left. I have uncollapsed it in this presentation so you can see all the different parts of it. And I've also highlighted the parts of this that you're going to be most likely to use. In fact, on a day-to-day basis, those 4 items that are highlighted on this slide are the only items that you're likely to access. The very first one, in fact, is the most common one. That's the user maintenance screen. So most likely on a day-to-day basis, you're not going to be reconfiguring your security setup. What you're going to be doing on a day-to-day basis is managing users' specific access or adding or removing users. So we'll look at an example of a task. So to add I'm getting some messages that say people can't see the slides as we progress. Can anyone see the slides as we progress, or are you all seeing the very first slide? If you could please go ahead and type something into the chat window. Okay, so I'm getting some that are saying they can see it. So for those of you who can't see the slides as we progress, please maybe log out and try to log back in. Thank you very much. I appreciate all the comments. Thank you. So we'll go over one simple task, which is to add a role to a user. I'm not going to go through these bullets step by step right now. This is for your review later, but we'll go through them. So we're going to, in this example, we're going to go through the task of adding a role to my user. So if you notice, I'll go back a couple of slides. In this screen, I pointed out the user maintenance link. If I click there, I end up on this screen where I can search by last name. You can also use an asterisk as a wildcard, so I could have said RE star, and it will bring my user. I can then right-click on my user at the row that appears below, and then select the Edit RM information. Okay, so let's talk about this screen for a second. That check LS flag is kind of the biggest determiner of what's happening with security at any given time. It is user specific. So for every user in your system, you can determine whether or not check LS is turned on or off. So what does it mean? Check LS determines whether or not Lawson security applies to this user or LAUA applies to this user. It should be set to yes if you want to have that user access security. It should be set to no if you want to have the user use LAUA. In the screenshot, I have it set to no because my user is using Lawson LAUA, but you'll want to set yours to yes if you want them to use Lawson security. The nice thing about that flag is you can literally roll security out one user at a time if you wanted to. You'll notice there's other asterisks on the screen, so group and role have asterisks next to them. That means groups and roles have been assigned to this user. You'll notice that the product line is set to test. And then further down on the bottom of the screen, you'll notice that the name fields are filled in, and there's an ID that is blocked out. That ID is the user ID on the system, whether it be Windows or Unix. That would be the user ID. So what we do here to assign roles is to click on that role which says role, and that will bring up a dialog box. Not quite. There's a trick to this, which I've outlined in that slide. But you'll end up on the screen. You'll select the role you want to assign to me as a user. You'll click that button that normally would take you to that button right there. That takes it to the right side of the screen. So now you've assigned it. And you click Finish, which assigns it to me, but then you stop to save the record. Right? You can close that resulting screen, which will prompt you to save the record. So another task that you're likely to do maybe not on a day-to-day basis, but often, is to grant access to a new online screen or to an online screen that hasn't been granted access to in any other security class. So in this example, I'm going to pick a very simple example. I'm going to add the CU01 screen to its security class. The CU01 screen is inside the IF system code. That's the interface system code, and it is a screen that handles currency codes. I picked that because it's a very simple example. You'll notice once I try to add, so at this point I've selected a security class I want to add this rule to. What I want to really point out here is the biggest thing that's kind of a big leap for people to understand about how security works. If I want to grant access to CU01.1, I have to give access to really 4 different things in order for me to get here. The first thing is the IF system code, because if I want to access anything within the IF system code, I have to have access to the IF system code. Second, I want to have access to the CU01 screen. Now, not the token.1, we're just talking about CU01 screen, so that's that second green arrow. And that third green arrow on the left is the CU01.1 token that I'm giving access to. Now, I have to do each one of these one at a time. So what I'll do is I would click on that IF system code. Then I would click on the grant all access on the right and then click apply. So I have to do that 3 separate times for all 3 of those objects. Then I have granted access to the CU01.1 screen. Now there's one thing left. I put four objects. The other one is the product line. Now typically the user already has access to the product line, which is why I didn't bring it up in this slide. But so your product line is likely the one you're giving access to. The user needs access to the whole of the product line in order to get into the product line. There's 4 things I need before I can give access to CU01.1. Can't just walk in here and give you access to CU01.1 and expect you to get there. So let's review that real quick. In order to give access to a screen, I need the product line and the system code, and I also need the screen. However, you might be asking yourself, now I'm on the screen, do I need to give access to each one of the fields and each one of the tabs also? No, when you give access to the token, it automatically grants you access to the tabs and the fields on that screen. But you can then choose to deny access to each one of those components as well. All right. This is another simple task, which is granting access to the product line. I'm not going to go over this one in the presentation, but it's here for you to review it step by step. You can't miss. Another one I get a lot of questions about is how do I secure access to drop downs and drill around? Now, these can be a little tricky because there's no way to, you would think there's a way to do that on the screen, but there's no way to actually do that on that screen object. Turns out that those are data elements that need to be secured from the data. So the way you do that is you have to secure access to the database objects, the database tables and records that are enabling those drop downs and drill arounds. Now, a quick trick to figuring out what those tables are is there are 2 files within each system code's source directory on your server. And you can access those if you have access to LID or if you have access to the directory structure on your server. And they're called, for example, in HR, they're called hr.or and hr.sr. And they reside in the Lauder product line HR SRC directory. So for each system code, like for example, the GL system code, that would be the GL SRC directory. These are just 2 files. They're text files. You can open them using the text editor. And then look inside there for the different types of drills and the different types of selects that'll give you all the clues you need as to what tables you need to secure in order to secure drills and dropdowns. I will say that securing drills is by far the biggest kind of gotcha in doing security, because keep in mind, I could give you very restricted access to a lot of screens, but you're very likely to still be able to find out what information you need by drilling around on a record from a completely different screen. So you really need to consider drill around security as a high priority if your goal isn't just segregation of duties, it is actually data security. A couple other things about Lawson security you need to be mindful of. Lawson security is a grant-based system. What that means is you don't have access to anything until I grant you access to that thing. Okay? Now that's a very good thing. However, the biggest problem with a grant-based system like Lawson security, it is very easy to contradict yourself in the rules that you assign in different classes. I'll give you an example. I could give you access to HR 11 through a class that's assigned to a role that's assigned to you. In a whole different class, I might create a class called Deny HR 11 Access, and I can go in there, select HR 11, and so say Deny All Access. I can assign that to you, thinking that I've just denied you all access to Lawson security, to HR 11 through Lawson security. Wrong. You still have complete access to HR security because it only looks to see if you have any access to Lawson security, to that secured object, and if you do, it'll let you in. So keep that in mind. It's very easy to contradict your own rules by setting other rules. The other thing to keep in mind is you can write very flexible, very powerful conditional rules on different securable objects. For example, on data elements, like company, process level, and different screen fields, like on the HR 11, you can literally pick any field you want, and you can write a way to secure the entire record based on the value of that field. So I can say, if the department is 1, 2, 3, 4, don't show the pay rate of that employee. I could do that even based on date and time, meaning I can say things like, on the weekend, I don't want anyone to access HR 11, or after 6 p.m., I don't want anyone to be able to enter a PO. I can do all of those things very easily. There are other ways also to secure screen-tested data structures, elements and element groups, and identities, which we won't get into in this presentation. These are very kind of planning stage steps that you would have taken. Let's talk about implementation of Lawson security. Now, when people look at planning, typically you're planning for Lawson security implementation ahead of time, and what I want you to be mindful of is 50% of most of the projects we've done close to 40 projects in Nogalis with Lawson security. What we see is when not enough planning goes in, then the project doesn't succeed, meaning you have to start redoing things at some point, and there's quite a bit of redoing work going on when there isn't enough planning. So we emphasize spending half of your time, 50% of the effort of the project should be spent on planning, designing, and making sure there's contradictions aren't there, and that you've selected all the right roles, and that they make sense, not just for today, but for a growth type situation. Only 30% of that time is likely to be spent on development. There is not a huge development effort that ever happens, but a big chunk of time is spent on testing because, like I said, no matter how much planning you do, there is going to be some contradictions that happen. There's going to be some gotchas in there, but if you plan well, those are going to be very easy things to fix and test. Now, methodology. I can go on and on about how methodology works, and I can answer any questions afterwards. But some of the things that I can give you now is, one, start with a great naming convention. Give this a lot of thought because this is going to be a big gotcha at the end of the day. You're going to have lots of security classes. You're going to have lots of roles. And if they're not named properly, it's going to make life very difficult what you want to do is, at a glance, you should know what that security class does. It should be easy to sort, and it should be easy to group together different security classes. Start with your roles and determine what roles exist within your company. So you just start with those roles, have a good naming convention for your roles as well, so you understand them. They're easy to determine what they do, and they're easy to manage. You don't want thousands of roles. You want as many roles as you need to kind of complete different types of roles within the company. It is very common. It is, in fact, recommended that a single user have many roles, but not, dozens. We're talking typically 5 or 6 roles makes sense. Some users have more, some users have less. Determine the tasks each role needs. Now, those tasks are your security class. A big, great shortcut is Lawson delivers a quick set of security classes you can upload into your system. I don't know the exact number. I want to say there are a couple hundred security classes. They're very well done. They make a lot of sense. The rules that they've put in there are very flexible. They're nice. I can guarantee you're going to make some changes to them, but starting out of a box is a very good place to start. I like working with those security classes to begin with. They're named well. And then you got to determine what each task is composed of, and that's when you kind of start getting into your company's real goals behind implementing security. A lot of companies want to do data security. Many just want to use the tool for segregation of duties. So whatever your goals are going to determine how stringent those rules are going to be. And then you obviously assign those classes to those roles and those roles to those users. My biggest recommendation is make sure that you do the users in groups. Don't do everybody at once. This way you can do less less reworking, and you don't need as much planning to make sure everything goes up. It's very easy to switch users back to just check how that's back to go. Real quick on troubleshooting, you guys can go through this yourself, but there's a lot of caching going on, so I usually do an iOS cache refresh when things are not working. I sometimes clear my browsing history and restart the browsers. And then maybe just test the one thing you want to be testing. Don't try to test everything all at once. There's caching intervals that are set on the server that you can change. You can always try going back to lib and trying the action through there. And then really at the end, just take a quick break and maybe it'll come to you. That really wraps it up. The next webinar we're going to have is on Microsoft add-ins. That's on July 25th. You can sign up for it the same way you signed up for this one, nogalis.com/education.html. We're going to teach you some basics in Microsoft add-ins, hopefully within a half hour, and you can do some queries and data load. So now I can open it up to questions, which you can either use the left side of the screen or you can tweet your questions at us, and we'll be more than happy to answer them even after the presentation.